Hey, shalom, shalom to all my fellow brothers and sisters out there. It's me again, Damian Powell from YeshuaSavesAll.com. Peace be to you in the name of our Father, Yahweh, and our Adon, our Master, the Son of Yahweh, Yeshua HaMashiach. So today, my fellow brothers and sisters, we're going to be talking about beware of meat sacrificed to idols and blood. Very important topic. So we, as followers of Yeshua, have to remember that our Elohim of Yisrael has called us out of the world to be separate and kodesh, holy unto him. Everything from wearing the tzitzit, which are the tassels, the fringes that our Messiah, Mashiach Yeshua wore, to the dietary laws of eating nothing but clean food, and to the Sabbath day are automatic indicators to the world that you are different. We are different, okay? And it shows us that we belong to our Father Yahweh and his Son, his Bane, Yeshua HaMashiach. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Therefore, we must do everything that we can to obey our Father in the Shamayim, the heavens. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2. Yahweh says, "Speak to all the congregation of the children of Yisrael and say to them, be Kodesh, holy, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am Kodesh." Okay, so what we will be discussing is not eating blood or meat that has been strangled or died within itself, kosher meat, and not eating meat sacrificed to idols. All right, so let's get into it. The consequences of eating blood slash strangled meat. Okay, they correlate, and we'll get into that. Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 9, verse 4 through 5 says, "But do not eat flesh with its life, its blood." Genesis, chapter 17, verse 10 through 14. Genesis, chapter 17, verse 10 through 14. "And any man of the house of Yisrael, or of the strangers who sojourn among you, who eats any blood." Okay, so if you notice, it's for everyone. Like I said, that stranger who sojourns among you is that Ger, the G-E-R, the one grafted into the nation of Israel just as a native born. Same thing applies today. And that's one of the things that I always talk about, that I've touched on in many videos. Anyway, any man of the house of Israel, or the strangers who sojourn among you, who eats any blood, I shall turn my face against that being who eats blood, and shall cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your lives. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the life. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, no being among you eats blood, nor does any stranger who sojourns among you eat blood. And any man from the children of Israel, or from the strangers who sojourn among you, who hunts and catches any beast or bird which is eaten, shall pour out its blood and cover it with dust. For it is the life of all flesh. Its blood is for its life. And I said to the children of Israel, do not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is its blood. Anyone eating it is cut off. So as you can see, eating blood is very serious. And I'm going to get into some details about this, but I just want to give you all the witnesses concerning blood. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26. Do not eat with the blood. Do not practice divination or magic. Now let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 16. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 16. Deuteronomy 12, verse 16 says, only the blood you do not eat. Pour it on the earth like water. Then verses 23 through 25 of the same chapter. Only be firm not to eat the blood, for the blood is the life. Do not eat the life with the meat. Do not eat it. You pour it on the earth like water. Do not eat it, that it might be well with you and your children after you. Even you do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh. We still have more witnesses here. Jubilees chapter 6, verse 7 through 14. Jubilees chapter 6, verse 7 through 14. But the flesh with its life, with the blood, you shall not eat. For the life of all flesh is in the blood. Lest your blood of your lives be required. At the hand of every man, at the hand of every beast, I shall require the blood of man. Verse 12. And this witness is written concerning you, that you should observe it continually, so that you should not eat on any day any blood of beast or birds or cattle during all of the days of the earth. And the man who eats the blood of beast or of cattle or of birds during all the days of his earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. And you shall command the children of Israel to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be before Yahweh our Elohim continually. And for this law, there is no limit of days, meaning that is forever. You eat no blood. There is no limit of days, for it is forever. They shall observe it throughout their generations, so that they may continue atonement on your behalf with blood before the altar. Pretty serious. Jubilees chapter 7, verse 28 through 32. Jubilees chapter 7, verse 28 through 32. For whoever sheds man's blood, and whoever eats the blood of any flesh, will be destroyed from the earth. And there shall not be left any man that eats blood, or that sheds the blood of man on the earth, nor shall there be left in him any seed or descendants living under the heaven. For into Sheol they shall go, and into the place of condemnation they shall descend, and into the darkness of the deep shall they all be removed by a violent death. Still have some more here. 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 32 through 34. 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 32 through 34. And it reads, And the people pounced on the spoil, and took sheep and cattle and calves, and slaughtered them on the ground. And the people ate with the blood. And they told Shaul or Saul, saying, Look, the people are sinning against Yahweh by eating with the blood. So they know that it's a sin according to what is written in the Torah and everything that I've read. And he said, You have acted treacherously. Roll a large stone to me today, said Saul. Disperse among the people and say to them, Each one bring his ox near to me, and each one his sheep, and you shall slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against Yahweh by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it there. So I just say this, I want you to think about this the next time that you think about eating a rare or medium well steak, okay, as it would contain the blood of the animal. And as we can see, it's a sin. And that's what they did during the days of Saul, and all throughout the Torah it is written, and the book of Jubilees, all these witnesses saying don't eat the blood because you will be cut off, okay? So stay away from these rare and medium well steaks. Also, have you noticed at times when you are deep frying chicken, when I used to eat chicken years ago, you would see it. You would literally see it. You would see you be frying the chicken, and then you would see blood coming out of the chicken in the grease, but you continue to fry it up in that grease. So technically, all you're doing is eating fried blood. You're eating fried blood, okay? Now, companies would Companies that sell meat, this is what they say. They say that the red liquid is not blood, but rather a liquid called myoglobin. This is how myoglobin is defined. This is how it's defined. The more myoglobin content meat contains, the darker red it will appear in color. Myoglobin content is higher in beef and lower in poultry, with lamb and pork having intermediate amounts. The age of an animal will also impact the myoglobin content of the muscles, with the older animals having more myoglobin and darker meat. Muscles that are used for movement also have more myoglobin content than muscles used for support. Along with water from muscle, myoglobin is what is found in meat packages that leaks out of the muscles during storage, and most people think it's blood. Now, listen to this: almost all of the blood is removed from muscle at the time of slaughter. So, notice how they say that the liquid is not blood in the meat, but it's actually a liquid called myoglobin, right? But they say almost all of the blood is removed from the muscle during the time of slaughter. Almost. Now, every scripture that I just read says Yahweh says, do not eat any blood at all. So almost getting all the blood out does not qualify or meet the standards what our Father Yahweh expects. He doesn't say take 90% of the blood out, it's 100. You're not supposed to eat any blood. So what if you're what if you are eating myoglobin with a mixture of blood? I cannot speak for anyone else, but to me, that's too big of a risk to even sin before Yahweh or Elohim. Now, just quickly, I remember when my grandma used to buy meat. You know, she's passed away now, and she loved her father Yahweh and his son Yeshua, and you know, she what she used to do was she bought meat, and then she would soak it in water, right, and then she would add salt to the water to draw out the blood. So it would sit there for maybe a day, right? Now, I'll just say, however, that we're not slaughtering animals. You know, I would try to get it from a kosher place, in case that the meat was sacrificed to an idol, which I will cover later on in this article. But I believe she did the best that she could during that time period, and she put it in the sink with water, soaked it, and put salt in the water to draw out the blood. So I'll give you an example of this. A kosher place to buy meat, for example, they would do the following to ensure that there is no blood in the meat. This is their process. Excuse me. All kosher meat and poultry must undergo a special process to remove it. The meat or poultry is soaked in clean water for 30 minutes, then removed to drip dry. After a few minutes of dripping, the meat is salted and left to hang for 60 minutes to further draw out any remaining blood. After 60 minutes of salting, the meat is washed 3 times in cold, clean water to remove any remaining salt. The result is clean, fresh, and kosher meat. After the final washing, the meat is dried, further butchered into retail cuts. So as you can see, it's a process to remove all the blood, not some. And I can guarantee that these mass slaughterhouses are not doing this extra step because it is not cost effective for them. They want to produce meat as fast as they can and get it out to the market. That's the whole point. And they will tell you, all they tell you is that they slaughter the animal with an unknown method, and then they tell you whether the cow ate grass or grain. That's about it. And as you already know, the extra steps to ensure that the blood is removed increases the cost of kosher meat. Now, strangled meat fits into the same category as not eating blood because this means that all the blood has not been properly drained out of the animal for the reasons I outlined above. So Yahweh also says don't eat any meat that's strangled. So meat that is strangled is not going to allow all the blood to properly drain. Therefore, you would be indirectly eating blood even if you didn't mean to do it. Strangled meat is meat that is not slaughtered according to how our Elohim prescribes it, which is, and sing, it's hard for me to pronounce this word here, exsanguation. Excuse me on the pronunciation there, but it's Exsanguination. Okay, but technically it means bleeding out, bleeding out. So therefore, there will be no blood left in the muscles of the meat, which is why all the scriptures listed above say, pour out the blood on the earth, pour out all the blood on the earth like water. And so we see that even in the Brit Hadashah, the renewed covenant, or what people know as the New Testament, we see it found written. Acts chapter 15, verse 28. Acts chapter 15, verse 28 says, for it seemed good, see, it seemed good to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and to us, to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessities, that you abstain from what is offered to idols, which I'll be touching on later, and blood, which I've already just covered, and what is strangled. And you see that they're tied in together right there, and what is strangled in blood. And whoring, and keep yourself from these, and you shall do well, be strong. So, the point is, my fellow brothers and sisters, we have to be careful about the meat that we're eating. Now, what to look for when buying meat. Let's talk about what to look for when you're buying meat. So if you're going to buy meat, try to get it as close to biblically kosher as you can. Okay. Me, I just give you my personal, what I do. I don't push off what I do on anybody else. I just like to give you an example. Okay. I personally abstain from eating meat except for one time out of the year. And that's on Pesach, which is Passover, when Yahweh commands us to eat lamb roasted in fire. Okay. Now, I get it from a kosher place called Kol Foods, which is KOL because they are the closest to the biblically kosher that I've seen. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but they meet the criteria for the best that I can get while we're scattered to the four corners of the earth. Okay. Grass-fed, grass-finished, no hormones, no antibiotics. It's slaughtered a certain way, and they drain the blood out, as I mentioned earlier, the whole process. Again, it's once a year for me. And in no way am I pushing off my diet on anybody else. I'm just making it clear about how serious I take this commandment and all the commandments of our Father Yahweh. These questions that these are questions that you're going to have to ask yourself, and the person that you are purchasing the meat from. As we can see, Yahweh is very serious about the topic of meat and what we consume. So it's not something that we should brush off. So now let's talk about meat sacrificed to idols. My fellow brothers and sisters, we should never eat meat that has been sacrificed to idols under any circumstances. For example, the word halal, okay? Or if you see the logo stamped in the meat, that means that they did a prayer and a blessing to ALLAH, okay, before they did the slaughtering. And that means that it's been sacrificed and slaughtered to ALLAH and not our Father Yahweh. Let me give you an example. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 13. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 13, which reads, as you come into the city, you are going to find him, which is Samuel. This is when Saul was looking for Samuel. As you come into the city, you're going to find him, Samuel, before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people do not eat until he comes, for he blesses the slaughtering. Afterward, they who are invited eat. So look at that. Right there in scripture, we see Samuel blessing the slaughtering to Yahweh, right? So think about this. The same way we see the righteous Samuel blessing the slaughtering in the name of Yahweh, before eating is what Muslims do when they slaughter their meat to ALLAH. That's why they put halal on the package. Okay? So that meat right there is the greatest indicator that you should not be eating that meat because it's been sacrificed to some deity other than Yahweh. Do you see how serious this is? All right. Now let's take a look at some scriptures concerning this. Revelation chapter 2, verse 14. Revelation chapter 2, verse 14 says, this is Yeshua speaking. But I hold a little against you, because you have there those who adhere to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat offerings to idols, and to commit whoring. And then again, in that same chapter, verse 20, Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, Yeshua says, But I hold against you that you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and lead my servants astray, and to commit whoring, and to eat offerings to idols. 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 7. 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 7, which reads, And every month in the day of the king's birth, this is Antiochus Epiphanes, when he went up to Jerusalem, and he was slaughtering the Jews. He was telling them they couldn't worship on the Sabbath, they couldn't follow the Torah, no circumcision, all of those things. This was all the things that he was doing, okay? So, and in every month in that day of the king's birth, Antiochus Epiphanes, they, the Jews, were taken under bitter constraint, which means to force or produce in an unnatural or strained manner. So he took them to eat of the offerings. And when the fast of their pagan deity, Dionus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go into procession of this deity carrying ivy. So as you can see, he made them eat offerings to idols. Why? Because he knew that it was a sin. The same way he tried to get them to eat pork. He was forcing them to eat pork. They either ate pork or died. That's found in 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and chapter 7. Okay, so he knew that eating meat sacrificed to a pagan deity would be an absolute sin. So that was his whole purpose. It was to make the children of Israel, the Jews, to break the commandments of the Torah. Acts chapter 15, verse 28. Acts chapter 15, verse 28. And this is the part that I read earlier. For it has seemed good to the Ruach HaKodesh and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessities, that you abstain from what is offered to idols. Period. This is serious, my fellow brothers and sisters. Yeshua himself says that it is a sin, okay, to eat offerings to idols. And the book of Maccabees shows how some Jews they try to force them to eat it, which is a great indicator that I said that the Greeks knew it was a sin. Okay, the same way, like I said, they try to get them to eat pig's flesh. They know that it's a violation of the Torah. They even defiled the temple and changed it to Zeus and put up the statue of Zeus in the temple. So as you can see, they knew what was going on. Any way they could to defile Yahweh's people is what they did. Now listen to this. Another reason why I would not recommend buying random meat from anywhere, such as stores like Food Lion, Walmart, or any random market, is because most farms are unbelievers, and they do not have the same laws in mind when they are slaughtering animals. Now, and eating meat at a restaurant without knowing where it comes from or what deity it may have been sacrificed to is a serious question to consider. Now, I'm going to read an article which should raise some eyebrows concerning this. Mia.zo.nz on their website states on their frequently asked questions. Now listen to this. The question, how much New Zealand meat is halal and why? Answer, while there are no official statistics on halal production in New Zealand, nearly all of New Zealand's red meat export slaughter premises are certified to undertake slaughter in compliance with halal requirements. This gives the New Zealand red meat industry the flexibility to export different cut from a single carcass to the best returning markets. The industry currently serves some 120 markets worldwide. Wow. So the same website has another frequently asked question. Who decides if New Zealand's meat is labeled halal? Answer. In countries where halal certification labeling is not compulsory requirement, the decision is often the retailer's. As New Zealand meat is often not exported in retail ready form, the final packaging is generally done by the retailer in the market. Wow, my fellow brothers and sisters, as we can see, it is up to the retailer to decide whether they want to label halal, slaughtered meat halal or not. And also, nearly almost all of the meat coming from New Zealand is halal, as they just mentioned, certified. And they serve over 120 markets around the world. So you can be eating this meat without even knowing it, which is why I highly recommend that you be careful what you eat. And like I said, we have to come out of the world anyway. So if you're going to buy meat, make sure you get it from a kosher place, or if there's somebody near you, get it from them. But we are to abstain from this and be really careful what's going on. DailyMail.co.uk has an article by a guy named Sean Poulter for the Daily Mail written in 2010 titled More Than 70% of New Zealand lamb imports to Britain are halal, but you wouldn't know it from the label. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. He writes, all of the slaughtermen in these establishments must be Muslim and say a prayer when making the cut across the animal's throat, which kills it. The New Zealand meat industry has taken the step to ensure its lamb can be sold in Muslim markets around the world. It emerged last week that British restaurant chains and venues such as Wembley and Ascot are serving up different types of halal meat without telling the customers. So most of the meat that's where it's coming from is entering into these restaurants and people are eating it and not even knowing it. They don't have to tell you. But we are the ones that are supposed to be separated from the world, and we should be on guard against these things. Okay? We oftentimes take these things too lightly and say we're just gonna go out there and just eat. It's gonna be okay. And if you ever seen the Food Inc. documentary, I highly encourage anybody to watch that. I watched it on Netflix years ago when I was watching TV, but it's also on YouTube. And this documentary says that there are only 3 to 4 top producers of meat of the meat industry that control most of the mass-produced feedlot meat that's out there. And we see that New Zealand is shipping to 120 markets. So this is alarming. This is serious, my fellow brothers and sisters, and we know that the enemy is crafty at what he does. So if he can get you to indirectly get you to eat meat sacrificed to idols, then he will get you to do it. I know that many will point to Paul saying that if you are unaware that the meat is being sacrificed to an idol, they can then consume it because the idol is nothing in this world. I do agree with what Paul says that if you know that it's been sacrificed to idol, don't eat it. But at the same time, Yeshua doesn't add any extra criteria to the words. He simply said, do not eat offerings to idols. So in my opinion, this isn't a topic to take lightly, running around eating all kinds of meat saying, well, I didn't know. And furthermore, one thing that I always point out in Matthew 18:16, that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established, right? So we have Yeshua, we have the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and the apostles speaking out against any eating meat sacrificed to idols. So that right there should be the greatest indicator, and there are way more witnesses to say no. Now, let's talk about an animal that's died within itself or torn by wild beasts. Now, if you ever watched a documentary about how modern day slaughterhouses handle their cows and chickens, you will probably be convinced to stop eating that mass-produced meat. But I want to shed some light on some things that you may be unfamiliar with and to show how serious this topic is, as this whole topic is. In an article from freeladythinker.com writes about Nestle. I spelled it out because I don't want to trigger anything to cut this video off. But the world's largest dairy company. At the farm, COK captures some of the most inhumane treatment they say that they have ever witnessed, including gruesome violence against mother cows and their calves. The video revealed downed cows, cows who cannot walk or stand on their own, hoisted up by their hips using metal clamps and dragged by tractors. In one instance, a manager shot a downed cow in the head, and she suffered in agony for almost a minute before she was shot again and died. The meat from that cow here was usually doled out to the employees in garbage bags. In another shocking incident, a manager stabbed a cow with no anesthesia and misguided attempt to treat a stomach malady. Workers kicked, stomped on hit cows, or sprayed them in the face with scalding water just to make them move faster. So, number one, like I said, from that documentary that I pointed out, will show you how chickens are raised. Okay, they're in chicken houses, they're stacked up on top of each other, they're standing in their own feces, and they rarely see daylight. I point this out to ask you, do you really think that our Father Yahweh intends for his children to eat meat produced this way? Is this meat sitting on your store shelves that you purchase your meat from? Has it been sacrificed to an idol? Is it strangled meat? We see that this meat from the cow that suffered was eaten according to the article. So there is no way that all the blood was drained properly out of that meat. First of all, it suffered. The cow suffered, and then on top of that, it probably could be classified as strangled meat. The blood wasn't properly drained out, and then they gave it to the employees to eat it. So who's to say they're not going to put that on your store shelf? Okay, Yahweh also says, do not eat any meat of an animal that died within itself, such as natural causes, sickness or disease, or died of old age, whatever the case may be. Okay, we are also commanded not to eat anything that has been torn by wild beasts, such as an animal being attacked or torn to pieces by a wolf or a lion, for an example. The Hebrew word is terapah. Strong's number 2966 means prey, flocks devoured by animals. So let us go over some scriptures concerning all of these issues. Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 14. Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 14 says, Then I said, Adonai Yahweh, see, I have never defiled myself from my youth till now. I have never eaten what died of itself or was torn by wild beasts, nor has any unclean meat ever come into my mouth. Now, let's be honest, a lot of slaughterhouses today, like I said, they don't have the same laws in mind that we, as followers of Yeshua, should be following. So, if an animal's torn by wild beasts, what's going to stop them from not selling it to you? Right? Or anything that's died within itself. Genesis chapter 31, verse 39. Genesis chapter 31, verse 39. That which was torn by beast I did not bring to you. Myself bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Exodus chapter 22, verse 31. Exodus chapter 22, verse 31. Yahweh says, And you are holy men to me, and you do not eat any meat which is torn to pieces in the field. You throw it to the dogs. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 24. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 24. And the fat of a dead body and the fat of what is torn is used for any purpose, but you do not eat it at all. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 15. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 15. And any being who eats a carcass or what was torn by beasts, be he a native or a stranger, he shall wash his garments and bathe in water, and he shall be unclean until evening. Then he shall be clean. And if he does not wash or bathe his body, then he shall bear his wickedness. Leviticus chapter 22, verse 8. Leviticus chapter 22, verse 8. He he does not eat that which dies or is torn by beasts, becoming unclean by it. I'm Yahweh. So you can see anything that's died within itself or anything that's torn by wild beasts, he says, stay away from. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 21. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 21. Do not eat whatever dies of itself. Give it to the stranger who is within your gates to eat it, or sell it to a foreigner, for you are Kodesh, holy people to Yahweh Elohim. So just to show people here, a lot of people say, see, that stranger right there is the one that's walking with Israel. No, there are two types of strangers and foreigner in Scripture. You have the Ger, the G-E-R, which is the righteous Gentile, the proselyte convert who's grafted into the nation of Israel just as a native born, and they keep the commandments. And then there's the Nekar, the Nekar. It's another stranger, and that's the one who's just passing through. He has nothing to do with the nation of Israel, and he hasn't joined to the nation of Israel. So that Nekar is the one that would get that meat, not the Ger. Okay, so just want to make that clear right there. Now I'm just going to give a couple extra things or some other things just to look out for. A good kosher place will feed the animals grass, okay, and will be grass finished. You have to look for grass and grass finished. And the place that I purchased it from is they eat grass and it says grass finished. So most places that say that their cows eat grass is they might eat 75 to 80% grass, but if it doesn't say grass finished, that means that they finished them off on corn, right? So grass finished shows that they ate grass their entire life. This means that the cow or lamb, like I said, ate grass 100% of its entire life. Many companies will feed them 70% grass, 30% grain, which throws off the omega-3 and omega-6 ratio and the CLA and other healthy fats, which changes the benefits of the meat. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 3. Yahweh says, whatever has a split hoof completely divided, chewing the cud among the beasts, that you do eat. So what is cud? Cud is defined by blurted.com says, cud is a portion of food that returns from an animal's stomach to the mouth to be chewed for the second time. Cud is produced during a digestive process called rumination. Cattle, deer, sheep, goats, antelope are some examples of animals that chew their cud. When cud chewing animals eat their food, some of the food is stored in a special pouch within its stomach. It later regurgitates this stored food or cud and begins to chew it again. So chewing cud is grass, hay, forage, which is a natural process of a cow that our Father Yahweh has given them for a reason. This special process of chewing cud, aka grass or hay or forage, is healthier, natural meat the way Elohim intended. The documentary that I was talking about admits twice that cows are made to eat grass, and when cows eat grain, when they eat a grain diet, it produces E. coli in the first stomach of the cow where the rumination is. This is serious. Also, good kosher meat will have no hormones, no antibiotics, which none of us should be consuming anyway because it's not natural. These hormones and antibiotics go into your bloodstream and can interfere with your endocrine systems, and that's a reason why a lot of people get sick and don't even know it. This is a serious topic, and I pray that it was helpful and help shed some light on this topic about blood, about eating meat sacrificed to idols, strangled meat, anything that's died within itself, grass-fed meat. Get it as close to biblically kosher as you can. And I wanted to say all of this to get everybody prepared for for Passover that's coming up soon. Okay, we have to remember that we have to live, eat, and dress a certain way and be holy to our Father Yahweh. This message isn't to judge anyone, but to clarify what the scriptures say, what's going on, so that you will be able to be better obedient to his commandments. As always, take everything to our Father Yahweh and his Son Yeshua HaMashiach in prayer. And thank you for joining in. And may our Father Yahweh bless you all in Yeshua's name. Amen. Shalom.